Charlie Kirk, the chronicle of a silenced voice and the scar of a divided nation. In the recent history of the United States, few figures have burst into the public debate with the force and precocity of Charlie Kirk, a young man from the suburbs of Chicago who, instead of following the traditional university path, decided to build a movement from scratch, becoming one of the most influential and controversial voices of American conservatism. His life was a whirlwind of activism, media, and politics, a meteoric trajectory that was cut short in the most brutal and sudden way. This is the story of his life, from his beginnings to his assassination on September 10, 2025, and the chronicle of the profound impact that his death has left on a society that now looks at itself in the mirror, confronted by its own divisions and the violence that these can engender. The origins: a restless youth in the heart of America. Charles James Kirk was born on October 14, 1993, in Arlington Heights, Illinois, a suburb of the vast Chicago metropolitan area. He grew up in a middle-class environment, in a family that instilled in him the values of effort and perseverance. His father was the project manager of the nearby Trump Tower Hotel in Chicago, a fact that in hindsight would be seen as a premonition of the ties that would link his destiny to that of Donald J. Trump. From a very young age, Charlie showed a restless personality and an unusual interest in politics, which contrasted with the more common hobbies of boys his age. While studying at Wheeling High School, he was not just another student. He became actively involved in political campaigns, such as that of Republican Mark Kirk for the Senate. But perhaps his first foray into activism was on a much smaller scale. Although revealing of his character, he led a successful campaign to reverse a price increase in his high school cafeteria. It was an early sign of his ability to identify a grievance, mobilize his peers, and argue a cause. Upon graduation, he was accepted into the prestigious West Point Military Academy. But a twist of fate, which he attributed to a matter of quotas and affirmative action, left him out. Although he briefly attended Harper College, a nearby community college, his mind was already elsewhere. He felt that the higher education system, especially in elite universities, had become a bastion of left-wing thought, a place where conservative ideas were silenced or ridiculed. This conviction would become the cornerstone of his future life project. It was during this period of uncertainty that he met Bill Montgomery, a businessman and conservative activist who saw a special spark in the young Kirk. Montgomery, a veteran of the Tea Party movement, became his mentor and encouraged him to channel his frustration and energy into a more ambitious project than just attending classes. The birth of a movement, Turning Point USA, in 2012. At just 18 years old and operating from his parents' garage, Charlie Kirk founded, along with William T. Montgomery, Turning Point USA. The mission was clear and direct: to identify, educate, train, and organize students to promote the principles of freedom, free markets, and limited government. Kirk had diagnosed what he saw as a cultural war on university campuses and set out to create an army to fight in it. The beginnings were humble. Kirk traveled the country, often sleeping in his car, to speak to small groups of students, hand out flyers, and try to establish TPUSA chapters at universities. His message was a mix of libertarian and classic conservative principles, packaged in a direct and energetic format, designed to connect with a youth that felt alienated by the predominant academic discourse. The turning point came when his fledgling organization began to attract the attention of important conservative donors. Figures like Foster Friess saw in Kirk and TPUSA the perfect vehicle to counteract the progressive narrative in education. With increasingly solid funding, the organization grew at an exponential rate. TPUSA became known for its often provocative activism tactics, such as the Professor Watch List, an online list that exposed university professors whom they accused of discriminating against conservative students and promoting left-wing propaganda. The initiative was harshly criticized by its detractors, who called it a form of intimidation and an attack on academic freedom. but it was applauded by its followers as a necessary tool to expose ideological bias. Under Kirk's charismatic leadership, TPUSA expanded to have hundreds of chapters in high schools and universities across the country, organizing massive conferences that attracted thousands of young people and the main figures of the conservative firmament. It had become an inescapable force in American youth politics, a voice for a new right. Parallel to the growth of his organization, Charlie Kirk's figure as a media personality grew. With his ease of speech and his combative yet accessible style, he became a regular guest on news channels like Fox News and a prolific author of books in which he detailed his worldview. In 2020, he launched The Charlie Kirk Show, a radio and podcast program that quickly positioned itself among the most listened to in the country. From his microphones, he analyzed current events, interviewed political personalities, and above all, fought the cultural battle that had been the engine of his career. He became one of the staunchest voices in defense of Donald Trump, weaving a personal and political alliance with the former president, who saw in Kirk an exceptional communicator to mobilize the youth vote. His discourse focused on the denunciation of cultural Marxism, the criticism of identity politics, the defense of capitalism, and a strong promotion of Judeo-Christian values. He did not shy away from controversy. In fact, he often seemed to seek it. His positions on the COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, or gun control earned him fierce criticism, but they also solidified a base of loyal followers who saw in him a courageous defender of their convictions. In his personal life, he found stability with Erica Francevy, a businesswoman and former Miss Arizona, whom he married in 2021. His wife became a close collaborator on his projects, sharing his vision and his faith. Together, they founded initiatives like Turning Point Faith, aimed at mobilizing religious communities around conservative causes. At 31, Charlie Kirk was not just the founder of a student organization, he was the leader of a movement, a media celebrity, and one of the most powerful and influential figures on the American right. The day of the tragedy, a shot in Utah. On September 10, 2025, Charlie Kirk was on the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. It was one of the many events he used to star in, a format in which he felt particularly comfortable. An outdoor meeting, under a tent, surrounded by hundreds of people, mostly young, to debate and answer questions. The atmosphere was the usual at his events, a mix of fervor on the part of his followers and curiosity or skepticism on the part of his opponents. Kirk, seated, answered questions from the public, true to his style of encouraging face-to-face debate. It was at that moment, in the middle of a conversation, when the dry sound of a gunshot tore through the air. Chaos took over the scene. According to the videos that circulated later, a bullet hit him directly in the neck. Kirk collapsed instantly. He was rushed to a nearby hospital, but the wound was fatal. At 31, Charlie Kirk's voice was silenced forever. The news of his death was confirmed hours later in a message that shook the country by Donald Trump himself through his social network Truth Social. "The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk has died," he wrote. "No one understood or shared the heart of American youth better than Charlie. Charlie, we love you." The aftermath: shock, mourning, and fury. Charlie Kirk's assassination sent a shockwave that transcended all ideological boundaries. At first, there was a virtually unanimous condemnation of political violence. Figures from the Democratic Party, Hollywood celebrities like Jamie Lee Curtis, or presenters like Jimmy Kimmel, despite their deep disagreements with Kirk, expressed their horror at the crime and sent their condolences to the family. The authorities acted quickly. A 22-year-old identified as Tyler Robinson was arrested and formally charged with the murder. According to what was leaked from the investigation, in messages sent to his partner, the suspect had justified his action by stating that he had had enough of his hatred, in reference to Kirk's discourse. But the initial unity in condemnation soon gave way to a fierce national debate. For Kirk's followers and a large part of the right, his assassination was the logical consequence of a rhetoric of hatred and dehumanization directed against conservatives by their political opponents and the media. He was elevated to the status of a martyr, a man murdered for his ideas. Figures like Stephen Miller, a White House advisor, exclaimed during his funeral, "Did you think you could kill Charlie Kirk? You have made him immortal. You have no idea what dragon you have awakened." From the left, while unequivocally condemning the murder, voices also emerged that pointed to Kirk's own divisive rhetoric as a factor that had contributed to the extreme polarization of the country. A painful debate opened up about the limits of free speech and the responsibility of public figures in a toxic political climate. The epicenter of this collective mourning was the state funeral, held on September 21st at the State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. Nearly 100,000 people filled the stadium in an act that was in equal parts a religious tribute and a political rally. With the presence of Donald Trump and the entire government leadership, the event became a show of force for the conservative movement and a call to action to continue Kirk's legacy. One of the most impactful moments was the speech by his widow, Erica Kirk. With admirable composure, she not only honored the memory of her husband, but also sent a message that resonated throughout the world. "My husband Charlie, he wanted to save young men, just like the one who took his life. I forgive him." An unfinished legacy and a lesson to be learned. Charlie Kirk's death has left a deep scar on the social and political fabric of the United States. Turning Point USA, far from crumbling, has received a wave of donations and support, with his widow Erica taking the lead to continue her husband's mission. His assassination has become a powerful mobilizing cause for the right, and his name, a symbol of the fight against what they call the far left. His biography is that of a man who in just over a decade changed the rules of youth political activism. He was a brilliant communicator, a tireless organizer, and a figure who knew how to read the anxieties and aspirations of a large segment of American youth like no one else. He was also a figure who polarized, who used often incendiary rhetoric, and who contributed to the tension of an already divided era. Beyond ideological assessments, his tragic death forces an inescapable reflection on violence as a political tool. The murder of a man for his ideas, regardless of what they were, represents a failure for any society that prides itself on being democratic. The story of Charlie Kirk is not just that of a young man who reached the top and was struck down there. It is a mirror in which the United States, and perhaps the entire world, must look to confront the dangers of the dehumanization of the adversary. His legacy, now in the hands of others, and the lesson of his death, a lesson that society is still trying to assimilate, will undoubtedly mark the politics of the years to come. Peace and reconciliation seem, now more than ever, a task as urgent as it is difficult.